Alright, so it's been a while since I've done a My Two Cents video, and anyone who follows Digimon might know why I chose to do a My Two Cents on the original Digimon series right now. And for those of you who do get what I'm talking about, I do plan to review that as well, the first episode of it. Anyway, that'll be the next video I put up. It's not a gaming video anyway. And while the cover of this video, the cover image does say that this is a My Two Cents on Digimon Digital Monsters, which was the branding in the US, I'm going to be talking about Digimon Adventure, the first Digimon Adventure specifically, in this video, and my thoughts and impressions of it in general. Because by God, Digimon is one of those media franchises that without it, I would be a completely different person. I credit a large part of who I am to Digimon. In fact, I credit a large part of my interest in writing to Digimon. I wrote Digimon fan fiction, original character fan fiction set in my own version of the digital world that I tried my best to tie into the continuity of adventure whenever I could. But it was still its own original thing. Like, I even remember, I haven't touched it in years. I even remember my main character's partner Digimon was a little snake with ridges above his eyes who could coil up and spring around. He was very agile, and he could aim his fangs forward and launch them off like little needles. And he could turn into a snaky dragon. Like, it had arms and legs, but it was snaky in terms of its body, that could draw strength from the earth to breathe fire, and it didn't have wings until it evolved further. And I put so much work into the world of those fan fictions. Like, the setting was sort of an overflow for the original digital world, where stray data and glitches and stuff were moved to so they wouldn't affect the real thing. And so there was like weird stuff in my digital world, like a river that flowed in the wrong direction and biomes that just stopped and transitioned to another biome with literally no transition. It was weird. I got weird with it and I enjoyed it so much. And put very frankly, if I could write for any licensed property, like if I could write a story using the branding of any licensed property and publish it, it would be a Digimon story. I just love Digimon a lot. I'm not even anywhere near to the biggest Digimon fan ever, but I love Digimon. I'm holding a Digimon in my hand right now. This is Metal Garurumon. He is a very good boy, and I love him a lot. I've had this thing since I was a small child. I used to play the terrible US Digimon trading card game. I still have a deck built in a box somewhere in my house. I love Digimon. And while I will freely admit that there is probably a lot of my love for Digimon which stems specifically from the fact that I have a lot of nostalgia for it, I assert that Digimon is a good show. That the original Digimon Adventure is a good show. Yes, it was very much in the vein of Pokemon, an anime created specifically to sell other products. Specifically the Digimon Tamagotchi-esque game machines and the video games that were coming out at the time, etc., etc. But they went way harder on it than they needed to. Like, there are similar kinds of cost-cutting measures employed in the original Digimon Adventure to the ones that you would see in something like the Pokemon anime, the early Pokemon anime. The backgrounds were mostly very low detail, static images, and there would be reused footage. Just instead of like Pikachu charging up a Thunderbolt, it would be really long transformation sequences. I still love those, but I understand objectively they're kind of dumb, right? But even the aforementioned low detail static background images were more than they needed to be. The digital world, despite the backgrounds being cost-cutty, are still instantly recognizable and kind of haunting, because the digital world in Digimon Adventure was very much meant to evoke real-life environments. But then there's this eerie kind of sparkle over everything. I'll try to find a good image and stick it up here in the video for you guys. There's this eerie sparkle over everything that gives all of that familiar imagery a sort of distant and alien quality. And that had to be intentional, because then throughout the early episodes of the show, back when it was more of an adventure and not just the kids running around fighting villains, the kids keep encountering, let's say, like random power lines or random phone booths or whatever, things along those lines. A rail car is like, there's like this rail car that's a big deal in the fandom. When Digimon Adventure Tri was announced, they showed an image of all the kids older near that same rail car. And they're just out in the middle of nowhere because they're manifestations of stray information which represent those things that just happen to be quote-unquote filed away in that random location in this world that is made of data which we are only perceiving as real things. And that was super cool, and the show took its time, and yes, it entered into a bit of a rut for a while where every single episode one of the main characters' Digimon partners was evolving to their adult form. There's actually something you'll notice about me. I use the English names for the characters, but I use the Japanese terms for pretty much everything else, because I wanted to sound like I knew what I was talking about when I was writing that fan fiction. So I looked up what the stuff was called in Japan. I'm that kind of nerd. Anyway, for a while, every episode was one of the main characters' Digimon partners evolving to their adult form. They got to save the day against whatever Digimon was the villain of the week. It was very formulaic, but there was always that underlying mystery. Where are we? Is this place really what these little creatures have described it as? How can we get these little creatures to help us get home? Can they help us get home? Are they being entirely honest? How can we best prepare them for the next fight in which they will have to protect us? These are things that the kids had to think about. And on top of that, they're some of the most realistic kid characters I've ever seen in anything, so they don't necessarily handle the pressure of all of this super well. Some of them handle it better than others, and that's to be expected because each one of the chosen children was chosen to fill a specific role on the team. Granted, some of them, their roles aren't quite as big as others, and their roles kind of overlap. Like Ty and Matt, for example, are both leader types, even though Matt's more of a loner. Matt's more cool and level-headed, whereas Ty's more impulsive and he takes action quicker. And they end up being kind of co-leaders, and it works really well for them because when action needs to be taken, Ty is there to take it, but then Matt being my favorite character, he's the guy partnered with this guy, he's there to kind of restrain Ty when thought is required, right? But then you have like Izzy, for example, who was their knowledge base in most situations because he had a computer that he could use to network with the digital world itself and learn things about their surroundings. And then you have Sora, who's kind of the mother of the group, and TK is kind of the little brother of the group. And specifically the fact that they had to look out for each other and they had to rely on each other is what made them strong, because they did care about each other, and that made them care more about the situation at hand, and it made them fight all the harder. But like, TK is Matt's brother, for example. He's Matt's younger brother, and Matt and TK's dynamic is so interesting because Matt wants to look out for his brother, and TK knows that he should let his brother look out for him, and yet they both kind of resent the dynamic that they're stuck in. Also, they don't know each other as well as they probably should because of character stuff. It's all very interesting, and I'm struggling not to go off on too many tangents and talk about it in too much length, because I want anybody who hasn't seen this show to go watch it. It's very good, and it still holds up despite the various cost-cutting measures, which get better over time. Like, they use the transformation sequences throughout the entire show. But the quality of the show, animation-wise, definitely increases as the show goes on. And so does the story. It stops being so formulaic. Like, there are still formulaic elements in there throughout the entire show. Except really the end, I guess. The end got super serialized, I guess. But anyway, there are still some episodic elements in there, but it shifts from being an episodic show with like serialized themes and character stuff in the background to being a very character-driven, very story-driven show. And yes, some of the plot points come out of nowhere. The villain Myotismon's ultimate form, Venom Myotismon, literally comes out of nowhere. Like, just straight up, literally comes out of nowhere. And the way they beat him is straight up a literal example of Deus Ex Machina. But all of these kids are like chosen and destined to be here, so it's not even that much of a stretch that something like that could and would happen anyway. So it's still fun to watch. And I can't even really go into detail about how the characters grow over the course of the show, because they grow so much. But their growth just happens so naturally that I'd have to draw a big old character development map just to make sense of it for you guys. Just trust me that it's good. It's very good. And the dynamics between these characters, the way they react to situations, the way they grow to react to situations better over time, it all feels super realistic. And I think that's what immediately drew me to the show, above and beyond the giant monster battles, obviously. And what made me keep coming back to the show so many times over the years. I'm actually due for a rewatch. It's been a long time since I've rewatched it, and I'm probably going to rewatch it in Japanese with subtitles all the way through, because I've never done that before, and that sounds like a lot of fun to me. But I digress. I love this show. It's fantastic. It's tropey. Like, when the characters get their next evolution after adult form, it's called perfect form, or ultimate form in English. They have to basically seek out manifestations of the power of love, power of friendship trope. Each one of them has a little crest that embodies a trait that they're specifically known for. And it's like, some of them are literally friendship and love and stuff. Like Ty's is courage, Matt's is friendship, etc., etc. It's very tropey, but it works in the context of the world. The show doesn't feel like it's being propped up by its tropes. It feels like a complete entity which just happens to be primarily made up of other anime cliches, if that makes sense. I'd go so far even to say that it's a masterwork of the type of anime that it is from the era. It's like one of the prime examples, because it is still a product of its time, and it's still a product of the product that it was attempting to be. And yet again, as I said before, it works so much harder to be more than that than ever needed to be. I just love it a lot. I adore it a lot. And to spoil my next video a little bit, I'm not happy that they rebooted it. The most recent Digimon series, the first episode of which has aired in Japan, I downloaded it and watched it, is a reboot of Digimon Adventure with the same cast of characters thrown into a radically different storyline. And I have some major problems with it on the conceptual level. And I'm going to talk about that in my next video. But I will say here and now, I don't understand why this was necessary. Digimon Adventure is a complete product. It has had now 3 sequels, technically speaking. Digimon Adventure 02, which had a different principal cast, but it took place in the same world, and the principal cast from Adventure was still involved in things. Digimon Adventure Tri, which, kind of like 02, is kind of divisive, but I liked it. I didn't think it was perfect. I didn't think 02 was perfect either. But I liked both of them. I thought they were solid, and they hit the right emotional beats when they needed to hit them. Tri especially, I think. And also a recent movie which dropped in Japan in February, I think, and was supposed to drop here at the end of last month, but didn't, for obvious reasons that I'm not going to go into specifics about, because I like getting paid for my videos. You all know what I'm talking about. I haven't watched it yet. I don't know that I ever will. I mean, I'm sure I will eventually. But from what I've heard about it, it kind of blatantly contradicts the ending of 02, and I don't like that, so I'm just probably going to treat it as non-canon anyway. I don't begrudge those who disagree with me, though. I'm just getting it out there. But it's a complete product, is my point. Going back and reinventing these characters now feels gimmicky. And yes, the show was already gimmicky, don't get me wrong. But it feels gimmicky in a sleazy kind of way. A very dishonest kind of way. And I don't like it. Which is why I wanted to talk about Digimon today. And this video has been very scattered. This is very much a back to its roots My 2 Cents video. It's not a review pretending to be a My 2 Cents video. It's literally just me ranting about a thing and conveying my thoughts, feelings, and knowledge about it in whatever format it ends up being conveyed in. So it's very disjointed, and I admit that, but hopefully through this video I've managed to convey why I love Digimon so much. It really comes down to the creative monster designs. I don't think I actually mentioned specifically that I find them creative, but I find the Digimon designs to be very creative. But it comes down to the creative monster designs, very interesting world, and probably more than anything, especially now that I'm mostly a grown-up, the way that the characters were realized. How realistically they were realized. How real they felt. These characters feel as real to me as a lot of people. And I applaud the show for accomplishing that. It didn't need to. It could have been a straight-up Pokemon clone. It didn't have to go so hard, and it did. In fact, I just talked recently about a show that has some overlapping gimmicks with Digimon, that being Dinosaur King, and I mentioned I really love that show. Ironically, some of you guys pointed out that I shouldn't like it ironically in terms of like the characters, because the characters are genuinely good. This is a brief aside, I promise. And that's something I guess I didn't get across in my Dinosaur King video. I actually really like the characters in the show. I enjoy the rest of the show, ironically, but that's beside the point. If you guys watched that video and you thought Dinosaur King seemed interesting, and you haven't seen Digimon, Digimon is Dinosaur King if everything about it was much, much better. Let me put it that way. No shade to Dinosaur King. I still love Dinosaur King, but as I said before, I think of Digimon as kind of the peak of this style of show. So if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. I think it's on Netflix still. I could be wrong about that. If not, I will Google where you can watch it for you. Just ask me in the comments. I will find a place for you to watch this show. I want to share it with people who have not seen it that much. All that said, though, let's talk about Digimon in the comments. If you are a Digimon fan, tell me why. Why do you enjoy it? Do you still enjoy it now? Did you like any of the sequels that varied in quality pretty radically? But in the meantime, this has been my 2 cents on Digimon Adventure, aka Digimon Digital Monsters. This has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.